Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to offer dana, then please do go to justthiszen.org/giving. Your support really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
We have people from all over.
Yep.
It's good.
So, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see you arriving from parts of the United States and Switzerland and Northern England and everywhere. Really looking forward to our evening together here. So we're in Sheldon in the southwest of England, in Devon. There are about 25 of us here in person. We've just finished our second day, I think. Second day. And we're really looking forward to this series of evenings together and together with you, Flint. So very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you offer the invitational chant for us?
May our intention equally permeate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way.
I'm enjoying looking at you so much. The unique breeze of reality. Can you see it? Can you hear it? Continuously, creation runs her loom and shuttle, weaving the ancient brocade, incorporating the forms of spring, and the woof goes to the warp, and the weave is dense and fine, one continuous thread from the shuttle. How can this even be spoken of on the same day as false cause or no cause? And alternately, there at the end, the unique breeze of reality, continuously creation runs her loom and shuttle, weaving the ancient brocade, incorporating the forms of spring. But nothing can be done about Manjushri's leaking. It's too kind of unusual. Translations of what we're studying. And I was getting things reorganized down here because I had taken so much of all of this to the retreat center down the road for last week's retreat. And as I was going through a bin to put things away and retrieve other things, I came upon something I'd forgotten I had, which was it was given to me. It's just a piece like Trudy's. I mean, not as elegant as that, but a beautiful brocade, Japanese brocade. Something I had received, a small statue, and it had been wrapped in this brocade. So anyway, I thought to share it because it was so lovely, and I just discovered it again today. I'm fortunate to be able to hear the Dharma talks that you've heard. As you know, Maria posts them rather quickly. And because of our time difference, I was able to just barely sneak them in, listen to them. And I'm deeply appreciating that capacity and the teachings themselves. But they're really quite brilliant and touching. I can see how well taking care of the Sangha with such sincerity. I believe those are the qualities that that Josh was talking about in his first talk, taking care with sincerity and our Soto way of engaging forms, and for us, gentle ceremony. And it's nice to be invited into it now. I can feel and hear the breeze moving through us, receiving the Dharma, expressing the Dharma, embodying the Buddha, weaving the Sangha, receiving and expressing with each breath. And when we weave, you use the same threads over and over. If the loom is set up, it's not like some extraneous threads come in, unless they do. But I was in a friend's home in Austin last month when I was there. And this couple, the husband of whom had a loom. I'd seen one in a museum, and maybe I've seen one in person, but I've never really seen one that someone is working with. And so he showed me how it's set up. And I was stunned at how much work it takes to have all those, each do one of those little themes, and I don't know what they're called, to set it up, and then it goes back and forth. And once it's started, it's the same threads, it's the same teachings, it's the same Dharma that we're weaving. The pattern can evolve and change and have a lot of variability, but we're using the same teachings over and over. And hopefully the pattern comes forward in a way that's wholesome and helpful and nourishing for everyone. What is this unique breeze of reality? One continuous thread, raveling and unraveling. Doesn't it feel like that in life sometimes? It's like raveling and unraveling. Life and death, breath after breath. And we create things, we destroy things. We come forward, we slip away. Raveling and unraveling. But as William Stafford said in his poem, which you all know, we never let go of the thread. His brief poem, The Way It Is, I'll speak it again just because it's so encouraging. He says, there's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die. You suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. It's a wonderful Dharmic poem. And the title, The Way It Is, just this, your title in a way. There's a thread you follow, and it goes among the things that change, but it doesn't change. One continuous thread comes from the shuttle, it says in the poem, in the ancient poem. The unique breeze of reality. And then the question is, can you see it or hear it? The unique quality, maybe I would say, the unique meaning of each moment of our lives, the unique quality and feeling and shape of how we meet each other. Do you notice it? Do you hear it? Do you feel it? There's a teaching from Maitreya Buddha, which is the kind of mythological or iconic figure of the Buddha of the future, the one to come, the Buddha of infinite light. Says, because just as every drop of water is of one taste with the ocean, so every phenomenon is of one taste with natural emptiness. Using that analogy of each drop of the ocean of water is one taste of the ocean, but every breath and every moment, every breeze every sound, every sight, every bluebell is one taste of the infinite, of natural emptiness. And then there's those interesting lines at the end. I'm just kind of reviewing here our primary text. In the first translation, how could it be spoken of on the same day as false cause or no cause? It's one of those lines that we kind of just scratch our head like, what? And then the other translation, nothing can be done about Manjushri's leaking. So I'm going to make comments on both of those because they're sort of unusual. How could this beautiful first part of the poem about the unique breeze of reality, how could this be spoken of on the same day as false cause or no cause? And I began to think, do our teachings that we offer, or arguments or discussions or essays we write about the Dharma really clarify anything? We hope it does. How could this be spoken of on the same day as false cause? We think we know what's wrong. We have all these ideas about the fault. What's wrong? Who's wrong? How it's wrong. And we get so tangled up in form, trying to sort it all out. And the same day as false cause or no cause. No cause. As Maitreya said, everything is a taste of emptiness. So why be concerned? It's all empty. And then suddenly we're caught in emptiness. How could this be spoken of on the same day as form or emptiness? In the Shinshin Ming, there's a section in the middle that I'll remind you of, which you've heard. But it gives us the instruction. It gives us encouragement. It also gives us a warning about what's being spoken of here. And this is the place in the narrative of this beautiful long poem where it says, don't get tangled in the world. Don't lose yourself in emptiness. In other words, don't get tangled in false cause. Don't lose yourself in no cause. Be at peace in the oneness of things, and all errors will disappear by themselves. If you don't live the Tao, you fall into assertion or denial. Asserting that the world is real. These problems are real. I am real. All of this is real. Asserting that the world is real, you're blind to its deeper reality. Denying that the world is real, no, it's all empty. You're blind to the selflessness of all things. And then, the more you think about these matters, the farther you are from the truth. Does that really help? Step aside from all thinking and there's nowhere you can't go. Doesn't mean don't think. Step beyond, step into a larger space. Returning to the root, you find the meaning. Chasing appearances, you lose the source. At the moment of profound insight, you transcend both appearance and emptiness. So here's our key. You transcend form and emptiness. And then my favorite line, don't keep searching for the truth. Just let go of your opinions. How could this be spoken of? And then the other translation, that last line, which is very different. Nothing can be done about Manjushri's leaking. Well, Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom and clarity. So Manjushri's leaking, it's like Manjushri talking to the tabloids or something and leaking something. So what it's talking about is there's a Sanskrit word, which I can't remember actually, which means this sort of leaking. It means an outflow, a defilement. An outflow is anything that does flow out of this being, which is created by our sensory apparatus in the mind, which is all contingent and it's all a projection. It's the understanding that through our sensory input, we create a world, which is we call our mind, and everything exists within that world that we've created. And then we respond as if we're actually touching the world. And each of us is caught up in one or more of these kind of outflows or another almost all the time. Especially when we think and have feelings about, other people. Nothing can be done about Manjushri's leaking. Nothing can be done about this. Which sounds a bit sad when I say it that way. Nothing can be done about the leaking even of ultimate wisdom because we are informed. So how do we navigate and work with this thread, this loom, this tangible breeze of reality? Because something can be done about the way that we handle the fabric. Nothing can be done about the fact that we only understand our life through our senses, and we create the world in that way and create our relationships in that way. That's not going to change. Nothing can be done about that. But what we can do something about is how we meet all of that and understand it. And that view, right view, and that response, in the wake, liberated response, offers us something quite different. In Trudy's talk, she gave you quite a bit of the unusual and gorgeous brocade teachings of Bayo Akamave. His way of writing is very unusual and beautiful. And in it, he says, your life's work is an intergenerational project, an ancestral conspiracy, a continuous meeting of bodies, a querying of temporality. What a list. This is your life's work. Intergenerational project. You're one thread among this fabric. An ancestral conspiracy. That stuff was set up before you came around, by the way. We chant all our ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion. That's the ancestral conspiracy. A continuous meeting of bodies, born by body, speech, and mind. We confess and repent. A queering of temporality. I love that. What do you think he's meaning by that? Our way of understanding time isn't quite so linear, isn't quite so what we think it is. And your life's work is to sit in the midst of this fabric and find our way. One of my students in Austin, Cassie knows, and probably, I don't know if Emily, Trent Schmidhouse, maybe Trent. He said something the other day in a group that I was just stunned. I stopped him. He said, our body is an ancestral meeting place. Isn't that a strong statement? Our body is an ancestral meeting place. And I think this is what Bayo is talking about. This is the loom. This is the place in which the brocade is made. And embodiment is the way in which we come to live with and meet Manjushri's leaking, how we understand false cause and concern, how we move with the unique breeze of reality. And I'll just briefly, in part of this sort of review, go back to Joshu. You remember the story that Josh told the first night about a monk asked Joshu for a long time, I've heard of the stone bridge of Joshu. He's talking about meeting this great teacher. But now that I've come here, I just see a simple log bridge. I thought to myself, it's such a terrible thing to say to someone. to say, well, I thought you were great, but you look kind of like not much. But I thought, well, probably people say the same thing about me. And Joshu says, you just see the log bridge. There is a log bridge here. You just see that one, but you don't see the stone bridge. And so the monk presses him and says, what's the stone bridge? And Joshu said, it lets asses cross, it lets horses cross. So he doesn't respond with a nominalization, with a making solid something. He talks about a function. It lets something cross. So let me read the koan again. A student comes and says, for a long time, I've heard of this Sheldon down in Devon. But now that I've come here, I just see some cottages on lovely grounds, but no temple. And so I might say, well, you see the cottages and the woodlands and the fields, the sheep, but you don't see the temple. And the student might say, well, what's the temple? Where is the temple? And I would say the temple is the place where we stumble along together through the forest. You know how the roots are on the path, crossing over the paths and lanes, moving across the lawn alongside the hedges together, remembering our wholeness, returning to wholeness, which moves on its own if we cherish each other and take care of our bridge of practice. This intimate crossing we're engaging together. This is the place where we help each other recover our wholeness and learn what wholeness actually is, rather than simply following our projections, those outflows, our ideas, and the life that all of this creates for us if we follow only the outflows. And it's also important to remember everyone is crossing in their own way all the time. There isn't anything but crossing. And in doing so, we can make choices. We choose to act. And we can choose to act primarily for ourselves, or we can choose to act for the benefit of everyone, which of course actually includes ourselves. But most of these decisions aren't very grand or what you call spiritual. They're pretty small every single day. And they happen so swiftly and mostly out of our awareness that they're sometimes hard for us to see. They were choosing our crossings all the time. Josh gave some really good examples from the kitchen during his time at Tenzo, and gave a beautiful example of a person laying the table, as if the world honored one was sitting at the table while they were doing it, waiting quietly for the meal. And Josh also mentioned my encouragement and confidence in him as Tenzo during that time and how the kitchen would run. But I didn't give a lot of explicit instruction, a lot of, it's not really my way. And I read something recently, which I only just now found, but you may have heard me say it already, but it's new to me. And I thought, oh, I guess I am part of this lineage, I suppose. Because someone asked Suzuki Roshi how he helped his students make sure that they follow the precepts. That did he do things to help them, guide them at the precepts? And he said, no, I just watch how they treat each other. And that's pretty much how I've operated. And day by day, we observe each other and care for each other. And we can choose to act from compassion, or we can be caught in self-concern, caught in the self-centered dream. And each time we make a choice, that choice is going to carry forward and amplify our ability to choose again. Hopefully with a little bit more wisdom and a little bit more clarity, a little bit more kindness, but certain decisions will amplify choices that might not be as wholesome. So we have to stay awake. And then maybe we're going to choose in a less self-referenced way. Sometimes we choose compassion, sometimes we don't. But the unique breeze of reality still flows. We practice, of course, to have a clearer view of all this, of our life, and maybe a little bit more finely tuned awareness as we go along. It's like walking, if you're walking along the path, once the sun has gone down, things start to be diminished. You can't see quite so well. And awakening is like having a torch or a headlamp or something that allows you to see. And from the koan story, Joshu, we observe that he says the horse and the ass can cross. They're crossing the bridge of reality. And he's saying, either way, you're still crossing. The horse inside of us, the beautiful horse inside of us crosses. The ass inside of us crosses. The same in each of us. Sometimes we're one and sometimes we're the other one, but sometimes we act in one way, sometimes another way. The unique breeze of reality. Can you see it? Can you hear it? There were some words I found recently, which I think I've spoken about in one of the inquiries from a writer, Judy Reutman, around authorship of things. And she says, there's no, I like what she said, there's no author for life. Everything we write, everything we say, all that we create is drawn from innumerable sources. There's no one. And I'm going to stop for a moment. It's very curious, some of the historical work that's been done on the teachings of the Buddha. Anthropologists, archaeologists have looked for what were the original texts, and then how did those move out and get translated into the newer texts and then move to another country. And they began to look, but they couldn't find a line. One cave, they find scrolls with some teachings, another place, other teachings. And it's almost like it was all happening at the same time in many places. There wasn't a line. It was a fabric. Innumerable sources. And Judith says, we don't own any of it. We only arrange it. Weave it. We only arrange it. That's what we're doing now. And by the way, in ancient China and also in Japan, sometimes when we're teaching some of the old sutras or poems or something, we'll say, oh, Dogen was referring to this, or Hongzhi was referring to that, or various people, because they understood things very, very different than we do. To repeat something someone else had said and write it down, what we would call today cut and paste, to put a document together, that was to honor the teaching. We call it plagiarism. They called it like ancestor worship. So the more something was repeated, the more important it was. It was very different than the way we think about it. The more they were repeated, the stronger they were, the deeper they got, the more they were revered and respected. There's a 16th century Korean teacher, Sosan Yuzhong, who said, preaching of the Dharma depends on the examination of the ancients. words are shoots of this mind. So how can we leave it up to your conjectures and judgments? It's just a way of talking about, we depend on our teachers. We depend on people who've come before us. And the Dharma depends on examination of these teachings, all of which are just shoots of the mind. But don't depend on your conjectures and judgments. Don't depend on your opinions about it. And I would say it like this, like realizing the Dharma invites an intimacy with the ancients and with each other. Those of you who were at the retreat that we did, gosh, I can't remember when it was, and I don't remember the place, but anyway, one of the last times I was there back in the fall, a couple of years ago, it was still during the pandemic, and we went to a special place and we did some training. We created the monastery.
It was Beamsley 2022.
Yeah, and
No, not Beansley. Was it?
Habergill.
Habergill.
yeah,
Habergill.
that was it. That was it. Remember when? And I did this in Hawaii also in the retreat. And Emily was part of this last year. I had people report on ancestors because we were chanting the names of the ancestors and the lineage papers every single day during service. It's a long, long list. And I had people, each person had an assignment to report on one of these ancestors. Women were reporting on female ancestors. Trudy had mentioned this the other day. The men were reporting on male ancestors. And suddenly it became alive. You hear stories of people's lives, the struggles they had, the successes they had, what they were named for, what happened to them. And on Saturday here, just this past, when we had our final morning service, and everybody had reported on their ancestor. It wasn't every ancestor, but everyone had had one. And I said, okay, as we chant, we're in a circle, these long lists, it takes a long time to do it. When your ancestor comes up, step forward toward the altar. And so as they did, everyone stepped into the lineage. Everyone stepped into the space. And it was so beautiful as we're just chanting along and people would just take a step. And by the end, everyone was circled around the altar and they'd entered in some way, weaving an ancient brocade, realizing the Dharma as an invitation to intimacy with the ancients and with each other. Another thing I wanted to kind of parse out a little bit was this thing about ancient brocade. We start out and it talks about weaving the ancient brocade. And so we talk about weaving and we talk about brocade, but ancient, we sometimes don't emphasize that so much. It's an ancient brocade. Here's an example. I mean, all the ancestor teachers are examples of this, but I particularly like this one as an example here. At the end of the Genjo koan, so almost everyone is familiar with the Genjo koan. We've studied it and read it many times. It ends with a unique breeze of reality. It ends with a story about Zen master Bao She of Mount Mayu fanning himself. Remember this story? I'll read it from the Genjo koan. A monk approached the mat and said, "Master, the nature of wind is permanent, and there's no place it does not reach. Why then do you fan yourself?" And Master Bao She says, "Although you understand that the nature of wind is permanent, you do not understand the meaning of its reaching everywhere." He says, "What's the meaning of it reaching everywhere?" The monk says. And the master just kept fanning himself. He didn't say anything. The monk bowed deeply, stepped away. And then Dogen writes, the actualization of the Buddha Dharma The vital path of its correct transmission is like this. If you say you do not need to fan yourself because the nature of wind is permanent, and you can have wind without fanning, you will understand neither permanence nor the nature of wind. The nature of wind is permanent. Because of that, the wind of the Buddha's house brings forth the gold of the earth and makes fragrant the cream of the long river. So he uses some references we're not familiar with here at the end. So the monk comes to the master and he says, the nature of wind is permanent. He's saying, we all have Buddha nature, right? So why do you have to practice? And the teacher says, well, you understand that everyone has Buddha nature, but you don't understand the meaning of its, what he calls reaching everywhere. You don't understand something about it. So the monk says, why? Well, what's the meaning of its reaching everywhere? And he doesn't give him a verbal response. He just keeps fanning it. Just keep practicing. That's the end of the question. Just keep practicing. And so Dogen comments on it. He says, the actualization of Buddha Dharma. He didn't say the explanation of the Buddha Dharma. He didn't say the understanding of the Buddha Dharma. He says the actualization of the Buddha Dharma. The vital path of its correct transmission. If you say you don't have to practice, fan yourself, because Buddha nature is who and what we are, and that you can have awakening without practice, you're not going to understand Buddha nature, you're not going to understand practice, you're not going to understand the Dharma. Of course, everything is of the nature of Buddha. The nature of wind is permanent because of that. The wind of the Buddha's house, the unique breeze of reality, the unique breeze of reality brings forth the gold and makes fragrant this life. I thought it was quite a lovely example of precisely what we're talking about. And of course, we're weaving these talks and teachings, and you're weaving yourselves together, whether you're online or in person, your hearts and minds. And Reutemann's writing that I was referencing earlier, she said, words are the shoots, like in the spring, the little things are coming up. They die unless they are rooted. And I would say rooted here with each other with practice together. She says the texts and teachings are meant to embody a community's truth. It's not just your personal truth, it's the community's truth. They're not supposed to emanate from an individual mind. They would have no validity otherwise. It comes out of all of us. And some of us step forward. Josh will give a talk. Trudy will give a talk. I'll give a talk. Each of you will help each other and enact. You'll be fanning, even if you're not saying words. You're enacting the Buddha Dharma, weaving the ancient brocade, stepping into the lineage of our family. Continually, well, what does it say in the poem? Continuous creation. Run, turn, loom, and shuttle, weaving the ancient brocade, and incorporating the forms of spring. And being there in spring is nice because it fits the poem, And Reutemann also says the tradition does not exactly change with time, but neither does it stay the same. Rather, it continuously invents itself from earlier sources, like a really good sourdough starter. I was thinking of John Oatman. A really good sourdough starter passed down from generation to generation and added to over decades, the additions indistinguishable from their predecessors. It's our weaving. And it's not, once again, it's not exactly linear. It's not like a simple this leads to that. The weave is dense and fine. It says in the poem, one continuous thread comes from the shuttle. So to be skillful and to weave beautifully, you have to be completely absorbed in the tradition you're in. And it says it's not a matter of authorship, it's a matter of embodiment. And Trudy was making that point so clearly. The warp is the steady teachings, sitting, forms, ceremony, fundamentally zazen. The woof are the variations of time, experience, response, things that are happening. And in that kind of sweet example that Josh had mentioned and I had spoken about previously about the repair shop, this is where we bring the most valuable, precious aspects of ourselves and our lives, offering ourselves to each other in the hope to be made whole, to discover what wholeness is, beyond our preferences and anything we could imagine to say with words. And I also wanted to add that this is not the sort of patchwork of therapy. And I don't have anything against therapy, certainly. I mean, I've done that most of my life. However skillful and necessary it is, because it is necessary and skill is required, but the embodiment of a sacred path handed down from our ancestors, who were just people like us, longing for their own wholeness and embodying the profound gratitude and humility that comes with deep practice. This might be what wholeness looks like in human form, both ancient and newly alive, all at the same time. Just like the rakusus and okesas, this one was made only in the last few years. But the form in which it is made is very old. It's sown with devotion. Ancient forms, newly alive. Josh brought forward a quote from Jakusho Kwong Roshi. He said, "I think of zazen as slowly unwinding a ball of yarn with your full attention. If you do it impatiently, you'll leave plenty of knots. And you'll still have to untangle them carefully. In fact, you'll meet all kinds of delusions through the unwinding process of zazen. Those are the outflows I'm talking about. Since your mind is with you wherever you go, you need to sit down and start unwinding your ball of yarn. It's your life. No one can do this for you." It's a beautiful quote. And it was also startling to hear because I had, without ever knowing this, chosen that example on the Dharma transmission talk I did with the balls of yarn. Many of you are quite familiar with it. I'm going to show Cassie's photograph here. If I can find it. Here we go. I was visiting my mom, and she and my sister were to come to the talk I was going to give after transmission. And I knew it'd be a very large audience, and I wanted something to embody the teachings. And my mother knits and crochets all the time. And so I said, and I had just been doing all these documents with the blood vein, the Kechimiyaku, the blood vein that connects all the ancestors. So I said, "Do you have any red yarn?" And of course she did. And so I thought, that's what I'll do. We'll start with the yarn and we'll have everyone hold it. But it starts by tying these two pieces together. And thank you, Cassie, for capturing these so intimately. Because the transmission was occurring between me and Peg. But then there's my own mother and my sister and my husband taking it right on the front row from us. Mom received it from me on the side I was on. And now she's going to pass it to my sister, but the ball will move, but the yarn won't. She's going to hold on to it. And it goes down the row and everyone holds on to it until the entire room was woven and the end of it came back, just like it does in the Kechimiyaku. So there's this big weaving out of the intimacy. And this is what we're doing, weaving the ancient brocade. We take our seat in the Zendo as the world honored one. That's why you bow to your seat, because you're taking the Buddha's seat. And it's probably a good idea to take it fairly seriously. And then you turn and bow into the room with all the other Buddhas there. You take your seat as the world honored one. And then your job is to hold the person next to you. And they hold the person next to them and in front of them and behind them. And through these connections, we're woven together, one intimate step at a time. And you hold it for the ones that came before you. And you offer it to the ones who will come after you. Because this is what keeps the Dharma alive. There is no Dharma, Buddha Dharma, without your practice. You are maintaining it. You aren't practicing something that's over there that you might get. Your embodiment is maintaining the Buddha Dharma, upholding the Buddha Dharma. This is what transmission makes clear. As we move through life, we react and adapt to people and circumstances we meet. And over time, there's these patterns of behavior that develop. A lot of them serve self-protection and help us get certain needs met. But we can start to believe that this repetitive pattern of activity is ourself. It is our personality. These aren't all the parts, but it's not self. And we can forget our true nature and become lost at the self-centered dream. And what we wake up to is this reality, to see it clearly, to be freed up, to be exactly who we are, to return to our true nature. When we say be who we are, doesn't mean to be all of our conditioning necessarily. That's going to be there. But what is it that's at the center of it? Kobenchino Roshi once said, returning to the self, the true self, which is nobody, is nothing but the complete awakening. We call this Buddha. And say it again. Returning to the self, the true self, which is nobody, is nothing but the complete awakening. We call this Buddha. This returning, this being completely ourselves and clearly seeing the reality within and around us is the essence of taking refuge in Buddha and Dharma and Sangha. This is weaving and reweaving the ancient brocade, the brocade of the ancients, of the ancestors, and of us, our bodies. Those of you that have sewn these things, you know how complicated it is and how many steps there are and how many layers there are to it. And the one that I made for my ordination some 20 some odd years ago now, I had finished everything except I hadn't put the straps on, but I finished the face and I put the frame on. And many of you know that when you do that, it's like multi-layers are involved in having this thing together. And on the corner where things come together, I just finished the final stitching for the frame. And I pulled the thread through and then pulled it and clipped it and cut a chunk out of the corner on the front. It wasn't very big. It was about the size of a match head. But if you're a perfectionist like me, and this was right on the front, and to undo that would mean everything would have to come apart. And so I called Blanche on the phone, humiliated. And she didn't exactly laugh at me, but she did. understood, and she listened. She said, here's what you do. Take some black thread, sew over it, like darn it, it's black fabric, and no one will ever see it. And you will always know it's there. Right on the front, right on the front. Weaving the ancient brocade, hearing the unique breeze of reality called human, flawed, beautiful, acceptable, cared for. Some of you may know that we had a Jukai ceremony 1 week ago today, on Monday, which was planned for Tuesday. Because a great student, Carolyn Miles, was very, very ill with pancreatic cancer. And when I was in Austin in April, I visited her on a day that she was not in too much pain and we could visit. We had a great, lovely, beautiful time together. And her mom was there. And we planned her service, and she hadn't finished her Rakusu, and she really wanted to take Jukai. And she said, so we'll figure it out sometime. And she said she wasn't sure that she might live to the end of this year, was her expectation. And only a few weeks later, once I came back home, I got a message from her mom that said, she's not doing so well. And the Sangha got together and finished her Rakusu for her and shipped it overnight to Hawaii so I could complete it. And also all her lineage papers, and name and everything. And then I sent it back, and we set the time for Tuesday, May 7th, for her ceremony. I would be here in Hawaii with the group that's here in Hawaii, so we'd have that group. And then there'd be people online like you, so it'd be a hybrid. And Lori Winnett would be there in person to hand her the Rakusu, the lineage papers, to do all that. And early Monday morning, because of the time change, we got a message from mother, and she said, she's staying alive for the ceremony on Tuesday, but I don't know that she can do it. So I pivoted immediately and said, okay, the schedule changes. I'm going to start calling people and see if we can arrange it now. So within 2 hours, we had it all set up. And Lori got to the house. Everything was there. We had people online, as many as we could. And our group then came and sat. Because she was so ill, she wasn't able to use her voice very much at all. And she couldn't keep her eyes open. She's apologizing to us. She's lying in bed. And so as we came to each of those elaborate things that you know about in the Jukai ceremony, where there's repetition and people respond, everyone took the vows for her. All of us, we said it. And then when it came time to offer her the Rakusu, her mother lifted her head and Lori put it on her. And her lineage papers, we put that on her chest. And let's see, I have a couple of photos I think I can show you. It's worth the feeling. These were not fixed up or edited in any particular way, but here's our group here in Hawaii. And what they're facing is a very large screen that came down from the ceiling, because we do photo workshops, so there's a big projector. You may see some people you know. So there's where we're sitting, and you can see me on the right in front with the laptop, so she can hear me and see me up close, and everybody else can watch the screen. You can see some people there you might know. Carolyn's up top left, just having received her Rakusu, in bed. There's a little closer. I think that might be all pretty much. Oh, this is just sitting at the end. we completed the ceremony. It was really lovely. She would pat the rocks. At one point, she just said, wow. Another time she said, I'm scared. Her mom said afterwards she was mouthing the chants. And 2.5 hours later, she died. Barely made it, but I think she was just waiting. And thank goodness we decided to do it, to cross together, to listen to the unique breeze of reality, to see the unique breeze of reality, to weave the brocade in a way that made sense. And just that day, as often happens, I received a little gift. I think Sunny Brown sent it to me. She's always sending me things. Some of you know Sunny. And it was from a woman, I don't know if you know her there. Her name is Chloe Hope. She's a person who works with deaf and dying. She's also a staff member at the Broadwater Forest Wildlife Hospital in Tunbridge Wells. It's not far from East Grinstead in South. So I don't know if you know this place. But as a completion, let me just read this to you, because I think it summarizes so much of what we're touching on today. Here's what she writes. Of all the sacred texts, and there you are in Sheldon, you know, of all the sacred texts, nature is my favorite. And in this season, it has much to profess. There are many a proverb, drama, and tragedy being told in the garden alone. Not least via the ceaseless attempts at courting by the wood pigeons, who time and again seem to be faced with merciless rejection. In spite of their impressive invitational bows and hops, may we all know their perseverance. Do you ever look at a thing which you perceive to be external to yourself? And the longer you look at it, the more beautiful it becomes. You can do this with almost anything. I do it with David. She names her husband. I do it with David sometimes. I'll lose myself as I watch him. And eventually some of the convenient identifiers which my brain uses to categorize him, human, man, mine, begin to fall away. Always from there, he emerges as a much truer form of himself. Being, pulse of existence, perfect expression of the universe. We'll do this with birds sometimes too. I once watched a collared dove and began to see her as a living poem, penned by existence as a love letter to herself. How better to say I love you than with wings? When we look long enough to see, do you see it? Do you hear it? Unique breeze of reality. When we look long enough to see, there's a beauty to be witnessed in the most unexpected of places. When the body changes as it prepares to die, we are witness to the working of an ancient intelligence, one woven into spiral shapes which began to tell our stories long before we were born. As the matter to spirit ratio of being tilts ever more in favor of spirit, what remains in the physical can serve as a visual reminder of just how great a transformation is taking place, which is what we saw with Carolyn. There is little more beautiful than the active display of nature's intelligence. Essentially, we are all temporary arrangements of atoms and molecules, so precise in their arrangement. It's ancient brocade, so precise in their arrangement that people actually recognize this bundle of cosmic elements and electrical impulses as you and me. But there will come a day when this corporal self will become significantly less orderly, so much so, in fact, that parts of the current me will eventually become part of the earth or a tree or, God willing, a bird. Please, please let it be a bird. If matter is indeed neither created nor destroyed, only transformed from one state to another, then we ourselves are neither created nor destroyed, only transformed from one state to another. It was David's birthday this week, and he shared his birthday with 3 hatchling starlings, all of whom were born at the rescue center. There's something both mesmerizing and oddly confronting about a soon-to-hatch egg. Perhaps because it's such a clear example of something existing in liminal space, a being both in and yet not in the world. I sometimes feel as though I'm both in and yet not in the world. That I too must fight to bring the world from inside of it, my shell made up of everything that I refuse to love. That I must fight to break into the world from inside it, my shell made up of everything that I refuse to love. The emergence of these tiny beings reminded me of exactly where I am. They remind me that I do not yet inhabit the mysterious land of that which is past, nor do I live in the potent world of that still to come. And just a little more. Instead, my beloved, you and I, and now these starlings, live momentarily in the realm of that which is. We inhabit here and are innovated by the current of now. While watching a heart rate monitor recently, it occurred to me that in many ways, life is like one massive singular heartbeat, a sudden skyward propulsion of energy and vitality, naturally followed by its equal and opposite return. All held on either side of periods of rest in the before and the after. How grateful I am to be mortal. To be subject to death is to be in possession of great certainty. And the certainty of my inevitable return to a period of non-existence highlights, by contrast, the preciousness of that which is. The longer I look at life, the more it seems to emerge as a truer form of itself, and the more beautiful it becomes. The more beautiful it becomes as we weave the ancient brocade. Carolyn's name was Daikyo Konin, Great Mirror, Illumination Love. And even though you may not have known her, even the story in those brief images, you can feel it. And from Trudy, the final lines of her beautiful poem, the journey of our lives are made of so many tangled threads, causes and outcomes far beyond our own capacity to comprehend. I shall gather these threads and sew an envelope for it, speaking of her Kesa, made of pieces from my life, an ancient pilgrimage, taking another step. And they're only ancient pilgrimages, only are taking more steps from these tangled threads. So I'll mercifully stop speaking now. I've gone on and on for a long time. But we have a little time if there are questions or comments or something that you feel is would be important to share or to ask, since I'm not able to be there with you in person. Anyone there in the room or anyone online? Claire. Full of feeling, huh? Take all the time you need.
don't know whether it's important, or that I need to talk about what's going on for me, or if I just didn't want to be alone with it.
The impulse in my body as you were sitting there, and Judy certainly reached out to you, and this is not a suggestion, it's just the impulse in my body is if I were sitting in a room alone with you, I would just have you rest your head on my shoulder. Just rest. So it seemed like my Judy's reaching out, and my impulse was the same. Yeah, not that anything has to be done further, it's just just to not be alone. Sometimes that's enough. And also in those moments when I'm so filled like that, it just gets worse if I try to speak. I don't mean, I just, all the emotion flows right behind it pretty quickly. I don't want to be alone either. All of this is too big to face alone, and too beautiful to almost stand alone. That's the great mirror Carolyn was, illumination was. It prompts me to request, maybe Maria or maybe somebody else, you could send me a list of all the participants, because then I can make sure I have every one of you on my altar. So you feel me with you, but I want to feel you with me. Oh, love.
Hi. Caroline's Jukai was probably the most powerful thing I've ever experienced.
Doesn't get any more real than that.
No. And so thankful for all of our connectedness, like you there, them, all the places we're all there. And what struck me again deeper was your comment of, I don't want to be alone just now, like alone in this.
Right, what Claire brought forward so beautifully and tenderly and
clearly. And also be like alone in my room right now is and so deeply not alone in my room right now.
That's the koan, isn't it? We're alone
Yeah.
together.
We're alone together. And what I wrote down from your talk was our body and ancestral meeting place that Trent had said.
Mhm.
And he was my sewing buddy. So he and I sewed beside each other the whole time. I guess I'm worried about regrets and if I've offered myself as intimately as I could or as I can.
Mhm.
And I worry about that.
Well, there's I think if we practice deeply, which you have and are over time, if that doesn't arise, you're probably not paying attention. And what I'm talking about is a wholesome regret. It's like what I spoke about, I think maybe at the last inquiry when I spoke about the gap between what I hope to offer and what I offer, and how that's a bit of a painful, heartbreaking thing. And it's not something wrong, or it's not actually a personal failing. It's just, it's like Manjushri's leaking. There's nothing to do about it. It's the way it is. But if you think you've completed it, then you're deluded. And that's spoken about in a lot of Dogen's writing. When Buddhas are truly Buddhas, they do not necessarily notice that they're Buddhas, yet they are actualized Buddhas who go on actualizing Buddhas. And if you think you've reached the end of it, you're deluded. If you know that you're not, you're awake.
Yeah. And
unless you turn into part of your conditioning of self-judgment and hate.
The Manjushri part, like, I always thought that it was her crying for the world. I never thought it.
That's Avalokiteshvara. That's the Bodhisattva of compassion.
Okay.
Manjushri is the wisdom one, Kuan Yin, or whatever is the compassion one. Same person, us, all, but just two archetypal images.
And so what you had just said was it was the outpouring.
Yeah, what can you do about Manjushri's leaking was that line. Like Manjushri is the one that's supposed to have perfect wisdom. So what do you mean leaking? It's like, well, we're humans. You're never going to fulfill the perfect idea you have of yourself. And that's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not meant to be that on this level. And do our best. That's aspiration practice.
Yeah. I'm so thankful for this Lancaster Sangha. So
I know. The whole in Sheffield, all the whole practice in the UK is extraordinary.
Yeah. Thank you.
But imagine that they're somewhat appreciative of Appamada because that's how they got started. Not us going over there,
And so we're woven.
We're woven. It's the ancient brocade. And now it's actually becoming ancient. We've done it a long time, sort of. Not ancient in actually UK terms, because ancient for them. Like 1,000 years, we're just a few years. I'll just say, in reference to a couple of things we've just spoken about, is this funny little piece of art that I made is representing the qualities we're talking about, because there's a piece of wood I found on the beach. It looks almost like a staff, in a certain way, or a crook. But it's just beautiful and it feels good to hold and it's very alive and dynamic. And then this, of course, is a plumb bob. It's just exactly upright. And these two natures of sort of perfect uprightness and the dynamic nature of reality is this thing that we navigate. Neo? Thanks for seeing your little one.
Say again?
We saw your little one. Hi. A beautiful face.
There's something about the different pieces that is not weaving together in my body very easily.
Huh?
And something in Judy's talk today made me stand up and pay even more attention than usual, which is the admission about being grumpy about the old Zen men. And I can identify with that thoroughly, that I get into the retreat and I get into the practice and I feel the breeze of reality as I'm sitting and I feel the way it's changing me. And then something cuts in and makes me question its relevance to me and to my life and this body and this land that I live in and was born in. And I can see the beauty of the altar, but I can't feel, there's a gap to feeling its relevance for me, even though I've been practicing with you for almost 20 years now and appreciate and love the practice. Judy suggested a woman that cares about that relevance, and so there's a kind of a name that I can look into. But even then, and also, sorry, Trudy said that we can adopt the ancestors that we want, but it feels a bit like a retrofit plaster on a very obvious patriarchal male system hierarchy where women were not invited or allowed. Now that's changing, but I still feel the unfemininity of the practice in the form. And there's a part of me that holds myself aloof to the practice, who finds it aloof. And I want so much to open myself fully to the practice and feel intimate with it. But something stops me.
Yeah. And that opening that you long for is what to pay attention to, because that's the only way you'll feel the fullness of the femininity. Because you're staying aloof, and back is your masculinity. You're actually according with the thing that you don't appreciate. But when you're doing what you're doing right now with your child, then we see your practice. You're fully a mother. You're a strong woman. You have a discerning mind. You ask questions. And by the way, everybody who practices deeply, it's a variant of what I just told Cassie. You're going to ask that question. I don't care how long you can practice. You're going to ask that question like, now, does this matter? Then you made up a narrative about it that has to do with patriarchy and all that. Yeah, that stuff there. But you have pretty strong opinions that actually aren't all accurate. So you have to challenge them. Come to women teachers. You look at the room that's full of people right now, there's more women. So notice how you catch yourself and hold yourself back from what you could be receiving as nourishment from women. You're a beautiful woman, and offer it back, plunge in. And if there are things if there are things that are upsetting or seem off about the male aspects of practice in the past, of course that's there. Absolutely, 100%. But I'm not interested in upholding that particularly.
I think there's a judgment that women fit in with the male way again and again and again, rather than being ourselves. And I think the fear in me is the women turning to the form and becoming generic with a way that, it's something I see around me. This is, and then there's a part of me that judges that this is the part of the same story, a repetition of another chapter in a long story.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think that's always true, but I understand why you could see it that way. I chose a female teacher myself, and the particular lineage I'm in at San Francisco Zen Center, for example, there are more women teachers now than men in a lot of cases, and they're finding their way very differently. That's why The Hidden Lamp was written, that book about the untold stories of the women, because they were excluded in the past, but because they're more included now. Your concerns about all this are warranted, and I understand. In the past, it's been a real problem, but I don't want you to miss what's happening and the way in which the practices are moving in a feminine way, and contribute to it. The only way to do that is show up and give yourself to the practice with other women. Thank you for asking. It's a really, really good thing. Let us, and seeing your full femininity as you do it. That's great.
Great to see you, Flint.
You.
Yeah, the Sangha reminded me it's my birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah. I've come up here in part just to be able to breach noble silence with the Sangha and share that with you. Is well, three things that are on my mind. Was one of them was as we were with you, I was looking out on the valley, and the valley looked like some kind of 12th century Chinese master's painting. It was just wonderful. It was such a perfect setting for our imperfect brocade. The other a memory that was brought forth as you were talking was a memory of being about 6 or 7 and looking out my bedroom window at this time of year and watching the swifts and the house martins flying in the dusk, and finding a sense of communion and elevation from them, to feeling their pattern of their way in me as I watched them. And the third thing that was on my mind was something really moving that me, Ra, and my daughter viewed in April in Manchester at the Whitworth, and they had a exhibition of Palestinian embroidery, and they had a lot of the smocks that the Palestinian women have been wearing, and they had them for about 100 years. And there was and looking at how it's become an embroidery of protest as well. But as I stepped into, there was a central room which had the tradition going back to about 1920, and looking at what the embroidery embodied. And as you moved out of that central room, it moved out to more recent garments of and how it became more politicized. But within that, there was a garment of a refugee that they'd suspected was a refugee smock, and it it had been extended, so there was an extra panel sewn into it.
Hmm.
And yeah, just the power of that particular smock, and how it'd been passed on to another woman who was bigger, and the survival of that, and just that, just the domesticity of it, and that as a brocade was so powerful, so powerful, and I really wanted everybody here tonight to hear about that, because it left me furthermore in a big puddle. The whole exhibition.
I can tell it really meant a lot to you. I was just clearing out my mom's house in January to have her move. You come across things, and I came across a very small little coin purse that I had bought from her, for her, from a Palestinian woman when I was working with the Palestinian and Israeli Jewish women with Dick Schwartz in a healing thing. And the Palestinian women made these things in their embroidery. It's all embroidered, this little thing. And I'd forgotten that I'd gotten it and pulled it out. So he reminded me of that. The Palestinian women had to, their families wouldn't support them traveling to these things. So they had to make their own money somehow. And they did that by doing these embroideries. So we would buy little things they would make to help them so they could come to these healing places. So I share your tenderheartedness in that. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much, Flint, for a very tender, touching, and powerful first evening together with us. And we look forward to being with you tomorrow evening. And before that, shall we do the echo together before we say goodbye? We offer the merit of our practice for the welfare of all beings everywhere. May all be relieved of suffering, free from fear, longing, aversion, and ignorance, and may we, together with all beings, realize the awakened way.
And will you be singing the refuges after?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes. Thank you, Flint.
Thank you. I will see you again tomorrow evening.
Tomorrow evening.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for being with us.
So we can say goodbye.
Say goodbye.
Everybody, see you all soon.